seeds of the urban idea were planted way back in human history, when groups of people settled in caves and lived together in a common habitat. Villages, towns, and cities followed. This new way of life proved to be far more convenient for people than their previous nomadic existence. Permanent settlements provided the opportunity to stay in one place long enough to observe and learn from nature's cycle of growth, to plant seeds, to reproduce them systematically, and obtain food. The discovery of agriculture, one of the most significant events in the evolution of our society, is intimately connected with the fact that man adopted a sedentary existence. Under the security of the cities, which offered food and shelter within their boundaries, the population of the world began to increase. Next to riverbanks, the cities flourished. These locations provided regular water supply and access to fertile land. As a result, the population continued to rise, forcing the cities to expand further. A significant side effect prompted by the birth of urban centers was that these phenomena provided people with a greater control of their time. They no longer had to spend all of their productive time on the farm growing food. The chains that tied humankind to the land had been broken. The cities provided an economic environment where people could devote their productive time to do other things, to construct, to learn, to think, and to invent tools that permitted tremendous technological advancements. And the cities grew alongside the progress of society in its march towards modern time. This progressive expansion brought the need for education, research, information, management. Services and transportation systems became necessary. From the very beginning, the cities became the economic engines of their societies, strategic points of manufacturing and marketing. They offer jobs and influence social structures. They are vital centers of culture, industrial production, and political power. My
migration to the cities is an ancient process, both in the richer and poorer nations. And there is a good reason. Almost without exception, the best jobs are in the urban centers. This attraction can be best illustrated by the word opportunity. The Industrial Revolution drew millions of people into the cities of Europe and North America.
If you want to follow me to the new land, we just came to a new world. A piece of land to grow on. We just came to a new land. We brought our families and friends. We just came to start a new life all the way to the top.
But the urbanization that took place in the West during the 19th century was accompanied by industrialization and rapid economic growth. And the urbanization of the Third World is taking place now in the 20th century in countries with very low levels of economic growth.
Follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want.
If we look at the growth of the cities in Europe and in North America, we see that they have been built up over almost 2 centuries, that the investment required for building roads and drains and all of these things has occurred very slowly as the societies have become richer and richer. But now, if we look, it's in the tropical countries, in Latin America and Africa, in India, in South Asia, we know that the resources are lacking, that the countries themselves are poor, that people's own incomes are relatively low. So the question arises, where will the funds come from? Where will the resources be made available in order to invest in new transportation, in new housing, and in water?
The Third World nations do not have the resources, and the living conditions keep getting worse as their population grows constantly. We must realize that although migration to the cities continues, most of the growth in population comes from within the cities themselves, because of the huge numbers of people already living in those cities and the natural birth rate they generate. This is a common feature of Third World cities. There are few educational opportunities. The sanitation and health conditions are very bad.
The problems of the cities are problems generated by their own growth. The lack of sanitation, water supplies, hospitals, schools, transportation, the congestion are the consequences of the cities failing to provide the necessary services to all of their citizens. And the projections are alarming. The cities will continue to grow in the future at an even faster pace.
In the city, there is no one. So many people, and there's no one. So many people.
The poor have few escape routes, few jobs, few opportunities. Shanty towns thrive. They multiply in the heart of the cities, yet they must be seen in perspective.
I want to make the point that the conditions in the third world have really no parallel in the poorest conditions in the United States or Europe. They're very different. Shacks, temporary materials, no water supply, no access to public service. These are the living conditions of millions and millions of people in the developing countries. Well, the first thing to remember is that the people are living there by their own choice. In other words, it represents their best opportunity that's available to them now. If people move from rural areas to the slums of cities, it is because they feel there are job opportunities. They feel that there is a better life there. So we on the outside looking at these areas can be appalled by these conditions. But you have to remember that these people find this the best available. Now you can ask, should society give its population more than these conditions? But it is the best. So in many ways, the slums are places of hope and opportunity and not despair in the third world.
No coração da favela.
Conditions are terrible in the slums. People live here because they have to. They don't have any other choice. This is all they can afford. And they must remain here because they depend on the jobs provided by the city. They have to stay close to their source of income. The city offers them their only chance to make a living.
The bigger cities of the world are no longer located in the industrialized nations. They are in the developing countries. More than 13 million people live here.
No coração da favela.
This is Sao Paulo. And this is New York.
There are more than 7 million people living in New York City today. Can you imagine what this city would be like if it would double its population within the next 10 to 15 years? It would probably be a disaster area. But that is exactly what is happening to Lagos, Shanghai, Beijing, Cairo, Mexico City, to name a few. These cities will be approaching 20 million inhabitants by the turn of a century. Mexico City is already considered to be the biggest city in the world and will have about 30 million inhabitants by that time.
Now, I don't really care about these kinds of population projections. I think they're scare projections. When it is no longer to the advantage of enterprises and people to live in a city, they will no longer go, and in fact, they will begin to go elsewhere. There's a technical word for this, reverse polarization. What it means is when a city begins to lose its attractiveness, people stop going there, people from that city move to other cities. It's a pattern that you've seen in the United States in some of the more developed urban places where secondary cities begin to grow spontaneously. So I think that when Mexico City is no longer an economically efficient place to be, it will stop growing. Whether that's at 31 million or less, I couldn't say. But it doesn't really matter because you're not planning for an optimum population. You're planning for serving people in the most efficient location that they choose to live in.
But given the conditions in the developing nations, this experience may not be replicable. The secondary cities and the smaller towns in the third world are presently growing as rapidly as the bigger cities, and they face the same problems. Unless the economies of these nations make considerable progress, this movement of people from one city to another that took place in the United States will never happen in the developing countries.
We have to ask ourselves, what will happen to these cities? What will they look like in the year 2000? And as we see now, most of the cities will have very poor housing conditions. Water supply and sanitation will be serious issues. And one very important issue will be environmental pollution.
Air and water pollution has risen dramatically in developing regions. The use of plastics, aluminum cans, and other products has certainly worsened the situation. More people, more machines, more pollution are some of the results of a modern way of life. The urban population of the world will more than double within the next 25 years. And most of this growth will occur in the cities of the third world. Now, the environmental implications of this expansion must be closely monitored, particularly when we know that the present urban settlements are causing considerable damage to the environment of our planet. Their further expansion can only make it worse. Nature cannot absorb the tremendous amounts of industrial pollutants and urban waste that are presently dumped on our planet. $200,000 tons of garbage a week are generated in the city of New York alone. Although awareness for the environment has risen, and the developed countries have made considerable progress to deal with some of these problems, the efforts have not been nearly enough. Actually, in many cities of the industrialized world, such as Rome or Los Angeles, the problems are getting worse, and these problems are being replicated in the developing world. Yes, the accelerated growth of the cities must be closely monitored because we are rapidly progressing into an extremely urbanized society and because
we don't know what effect the present environmental spoilage may bring in the near future.
Unemployment and low productivity perpetuate the prevailing conditions. But the cities offer higher income and better opportunities than the countryside. People are better off here. It is as simple as that. Much of the existing misery is created by man, and it can be undone by humankind. The growth of the cities is not necessarily wrong. The situation is not hopeless.
So many people.
But with urgency, we must recognize that the rapidly growing third world cities cannot afford to make the mistakes that the wealthier cities of the world have made before.
The key issue is to provide safe water supply, access to sanitation, and urban jobs. Income is the key, building urban income for the poor. 20 years ago, governments wanted to clear informal housing areas, the slum areas. Today, they're talking about improving them. Hopefully tomorrow, they'll be talking about providing the inputs necessary for people to get on with the job themselves: land, housing finance, infrastructure, building materials, and building construction capacity.
Despacio, hijito, despacio, hijito. Cuidado que te caigas, mami. Sem despacio.
The strategies to resolve urban problems have evolved and changed in the past 20 years. But experience shows that the best results are obtained when the people affected are carefully listened to and participate in the programs aimed to help their lot in life. The industriousness of the city dwellers is the single best solution to the problems that abound.
No development project can be totally successful without the participation and efforts of the people themselves. In this low-income community of La Paz, neighbors get together on Sundays to build access paths and retention walls to stop erosion.
A lot of money does not exist to solve the problems. Answers must be found with resources at hand. Good management, vital to mobilizing the human energies of the cities, is a crucial priority.
It is a race against time. There is an urgent need to solve the problems confronting the cities of the third world. But this is not an easy task for countries who are overburdened with economic instability and who carry an enormous external debt. Part of the solution lies in providing the urban services needed and in improving those that already exist. It is also important to strengthen the institutions that run the cities.
Low productivity in agriculture and the ravages of starvation are terrible conditions that must be resolved promptly in the African continent. But also, more attention should be directed to the urban areas. The African cities are the most rapidly growing cities in the world, and the problems of the year 2000 are going to be urban problems in Africa. This needs to be recognized and addressed now. There is no previous experience for the tremendous pace of growth of third world cities. The cities of the West did not grow at the same explosive rate, and many of the solutions on hand may not be applicable, but the technology and skills available represent a tremendous step forward in the struggle to improve the quality of life in the cities of the poorer countries. Technical, financial, and human resources are desperately needed. We must work to improve the conditions in these cities. They are the heart of their country's economy. Their advancement will parallel the progress of society as a whole.
Follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want to follow me to the new land. If you want